Hello, my name is David Stocker. I'm a product manager for SAP Analytics Cloud, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the new Smart Wrangler. So first, I think we need to discuss the content creator task space and explain why we built the new Wrangler from the ground up. And in order to do that, let's say if you're drawing inspiration from the OODA loop, there's a couple of steps in that loop that can be mapped essentially to dimensions on a two-dimensional plane. And one of those is the orientation dimension. And there you're dealing with either your proactive or your reactive. And your proactive dimension, or your proactive end of your orientation dimension, is where you deal with known unknowns. In other words, you know the questions you want to ask. And on the other end, you're dealing with unknown unknowns. So the questions that you need to ask that you didn't know you needed to ask until you got some new information. Whereas on the proactive end, you can bring your experience and your culture to bear. The other dimension or step in the OODA loop is really the observation dimension. And there you have data as you want it versus data as you have it. And you sometimes hear us talk about structure first versus data first, and it literally maps to these two situations. So data as you want it would be structure first. You think about how you want to structure your data and you fit your data into that structure. This is the classic modeling and then data loading approach. Versus data first is you have the data, and usually you need to make a quick answer, or you need to come up with a quick answer. So you have to deal with the data in its current form. And this is data first modeling. So if we take our two dimensions and we map them onto a two-dimensional space, what we'll notice right away is that there are a couple of situations that don't make any sense. For example, if you're highly proactive, you're probably going to be structure first. And if you're really constrained for time, you have to get an answer within the next hour or two, you don't have time to mess around with star schemas. You really need to take a data first approach. So in the corner of structure first and proactive, this is really our operational excellence corner versus our changers corner, okay? And the two are essentially in operational excellence, experience matters, things are predictable, they're refined, whereas in the other corner, it's highly reactive and everything is subject to change. These two, by the way, they map effectively to two poles in a magnetic field. And operational excellence conforms is essentially operational analytics as opposed to agile analytics. And if you look at the tool set that comes with SAP Analytics Cloud, you can map it into this task space. For example, apps and reports are highly proactive. Whenever you open Analytics Designer, you're really thinking ahead, what do you want to do with it? Planning is really like at the upper corner of being proactive and structure first. Self-service storytelling takes up a very large area of the task space, and there's a special corner in the task space, and that is the ad hoc reporting corner. And this is where you're highly reactive, you need answers in the next 2 hours, and the data is just really not suited at the moment to answering that question. So you have to be fast and you have to be effective. And this is an area where we really thought that we could dramatically improve SAP Analytics Cloud and make it better also for people who aren't even using SAC yet, because this is an area where people commonly have problems. It's this reactive, quick work on data that is just not clean. So let's take a quick look at the new Smart Wrangler. We built the Smart Wrangler from the ground up. This is entirely new code. It is, for those of you interested, it's a microservice installed inside of SAC and Data Warehouse Cloud. And it means that we can actually reuse this over and over again, pretty much wherever we want. It focuses on lightweight modeling. So the kind of simple modeling that users do when they want quick answers. And it currently produces data sets, which is it's a subset of our models, and it's just a lightweight model that conforms to certain rules. But all data sets are models, not all models are data sets. If you want to hear more about this, attend session ANA 208, where I talk a bit more about the relationship between kinds of models. And next year, we plan to introduce the Smart Wrangler into the Structure First workspaces workflow as well, so you can also take advantage of some of the features in the Smart Wrangler. But right now, you can change from dimensions to measures, you can delete and rename objects, create level hierarchies, geo-dimensions, which is something you could not do in the classic Wrangler. The UX is also pretty improved. It's rather greatly improved over the classic Wrangler. And there's a lot of new capabilities. For example, yes, transformations make an appearance again. However, we now have the filter capability among the transformations. So previously, if you had some data in the uploaded or acquired data set that you didn't want to surface in the model, you had to delete it. Well, now you can just filter it. You can create a background filter right in your model while leaving the original data foundation unchanged. So if we look at data types, they're strongly typed, and the new Wrangler is much better at guessing data types than it was before. So the new Wrangler is especially good. The Smart Wrangler is very, very good at guessing date data types. Validation is strengthened. It now only blacks out individual cells instead of entire rows. And in the case of hierarchies, you can create geo dimensions as well, which are also hierarchies in addition to level hierarchies. Parent-child hierarchies are something that we leave to structure-first workflows. We also have the new custom transformations. There's a new Wrangler expression language. The Wrangler expression language is sort of think of it as a hybrid between Excel formulas and Python. So the idea is to make it very easy for you to script your models. You can literally script model transformations. And the editor is very easy to use and powerful. It has code completion. It can help you fill things in. It's got pretty printing, and it already has a pretty substantial library of functions. Moving on to the workflows. So if you are working in an embedded data set workflow, in other words, you create a story and then you elect to add some data to it, you would upload the data, you would do your wrangling, then you would toggle over to the story. And the key thing that's improved here is you can always go back and forth between story creation and wrangling. And as you make your changes, they'll be automatically taken up in the story. And then you can publish your story. Later next year, we'll also add the ability to publish these embedded data sets as public data sets. And speaking of public data sets, the workflow there is also rather similar. You would acquire your data, you would create your data set. Remember, data sets are models, which means that they can be consumed in stories or apps, just the same as any other model. And you can always go back and open them in the Wrangler and modify your wrangling, and they're automatically picked up by the UI app. So this is probably a good time to have a look at a short demo.
So let's walk through dataset creation using the new SAP Analytics Cloud Smart Wrangler. For starters, I'm creating a public dataset here. So I will go and I will create a new dataset. If I were creating a story and I wanted to embed the dataset directly into the story, I would just start by creating a story and add the dataset there. But we're going to create a public dataset. Now I'll choose, I'm going to upload a data set. In fact, I want to upload the file used in the workshop ANA 363, which is a data set full of US National Park visitation statistics. Of course, I select and then I select from source file. I've already imported that data set here in the other tab, and you can see that I have 78,000 rows in the data here in 18 columns, and the sample size is 2,000 rows. We're limiting the 2,000 rows pushed to the client because we want to spare bandwidth here. We don't want to push all 77,000 rows across to your browser. It doesn't do anything for you. So let's take a quick tour of the Smart Wrangler. Over here, I have my new dataset overview pane, this replaces the old card view from the classic Wrangler. And you can see here, I can see which of my columns are measures and which of my columns are dimensions. I can change a column from being a measure to a dimension. For example, year, the Smart Wrangler guessed that year was a measure because it was a number. However, we know that it's a dimension here, and we're going to want to convert it into a date in a couple of moments. So I'll just drag this down to dimensions, and I'll do the same for months. I can look inside one of the dimensions, for example, and we can go into the details pane. I can see here a histogram of the data distribution. I can see the data type, for example, that it's a string, and I can see a dimension if it has, or a description if it has a description attached to it. Year, we'll take a quick look at that, and we'll notice that year is flagged as an integer. Okay, it doesn't really matter what it is. We'll leave it as an integer for now. Transform log I'll get to later. Notice that when I selected year here in the dataset overview, it was also selected in the grid. If I select state in the grid, notice that the selection is also reflected in the overview. Okay, so maybe speaking of state, let's add a geodimension. I can add geodimensions right in the Smart Wrangler. And what I'll do is I'll go over here and I'll select enrich by since we don't have latitude and longitude, we're going to say area name. And all of our data is for one country. That country is the United States. So rather than having a column specifying a country ISO code, we're going to specify from a list of countries. And we are going to choose the United States, which is this one. So now, because we have the top level region is country, and we select the next level down in the hierarchy, and we're going to select state. Okay, and we don't have any counties, so we won't select a third row. And it will take just a moment to create the geo hierarchy. Now, the next thing you notice is this, that there is an issue in our geo hierarchy. I wonder what that could be. Let's go and troubleshoot the problems. VI. What is the problem with VI? VI is Virgin Islands. And if we look at the supported locations, if we download this particular CSV file and we look in it, what we notice is that the supported regions for the United States include US states, but not territories. So Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Guam, etc. So we need to remove Virgin Islands. We'll just filter it out. Notice, important thing here is that filtering doesn't actually delete it. Filtering just simply removes it from the query, or sorry, removes it from the model that we're building. It doesn't change anything in the underlying data foundation. So we're going to filter out Virgin Islands. While we're at it, we will also filter out Puerto Rico and American Samoa. So Puerto Rico and American Samoa are not in our sample data set, but I know for a fact that they are in the larger data set because there are US national parks in both territories. So fine, now we have no issues detected. Okay, so first task done. Second task I'm going to do is I am going to create a expression. I'm going to create a new column. We're going to call this column cal month. And that is a concatenation. I'm using the new Wrangler expression language. And I'm going to combine year with month. And the delimiter will be a period. Doesn't really matter. It can be a slash, it can be a backslash, it can be a dash. Pick your favorite delimiter. So we now have a new column. It's a string. We can see this here. And I'm going to convert it to a date. Voila. I now have a date dimension in a data set that didn't have anything that resembled a date dimension previously. So we've already created a geohierarchy. Let's create a level hierarchy, and we are going to organize it by park type and then region code. So we can look at all the national parks in the Northeast or all the national monuments in the Southwest, for example. And we can do simple calculations as well. We can play around with the Wrangler expression language. In fact, in the workshop, you spend quite a bit of time playing around with the Wrangler expression language. For example, I can create a new column. We'll call this backcountry percentage. And backcountry percentage is going to be, in fact, a calculation, and it's going to be the percentage of visitors to that park who camped in the backcountry. And there's a column, one of our measures is backcountry campers. And then another of our measures is going to be, again, backcountry campers plus recreational visits plus tent campers plus, so this is everybody who's staying in a campground, includes tent campers and RV campers. So that's the main categories of visitors, and the result will multiply by 100. Fine. And there we go. We have the percentage of people in each park in each month who slept at least one night in the backcountry. It looks like Arches has a tiny, tiny, tiny proportion, 0.16% of the visitors to Arches National Park in August of 1987 slept in the backcountry.
So there's a few related sessions you may feel like attending. One of them, by the way, is a hands-on where you can take the new Smart Wrangler for a spin and really go through and use the new features and use the Wrangler expression language. There is a discussion on the relationship between different kinds of models. There's a roadmap discussion. And of course, we have the overall overview of SAP Analytics Cloud. So, of course, you can always continue your learning experience at the website for TechEd, and thank you for attending this session.